Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to recreate this effect in Photoshop. Someone recently posted this image to the Nucly Facebook group and asked how I would recreate it. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do that, and in the course of that, we're going to touch on smart objects and also the power of the hard mix blend mode. Now, if you want to follow along, I have included all the assets that you need in a link in the description of this video. Go ahead, download those, and then let's jump into Photoshop. All right, I'm going to go to File, Open. I'm going to start with this Digi file, and I want to set this up as a smart object so that I can drop in other images after I'm done, and they can be applied, the same effects can be applied to them. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and take my background, copy that, and then right mouse click and say convert to smart object. Now I can double click on this, replace the image, and when I save it, it'll drop into this at the bottom of my layer stack. So we'll call this image. Next, I want to be able to control my lightness and darkness underneath the effect, the radial burst effect that I'm going to apply. So there's a few ways I could do this. I could add a curves layer. I could add almost any adjustment. But what I want to do is show you the power of the hard mix blending mode. So hard mix is basically a gradient from overlay that takes you all the way to threshold. So it really has the power of controlling your contrast like no other tool can. So let's go to solid color. I'm going to make this 50% gray, and then we're going to take this and put it on hard mix. And as you can see here, it's creating a threshold, meaning it's pushing everything either to black or to white. And if I double click and just control this color, you can see I can control where that threshold happens. So a lot of control there of my contrast. The other thing I can do is I can take my fill here down to, let's say, 80% or maybe even 70%. And now you can see that this is acting more like an overlay of itself. So it's just contrasting itself heavily. And again, I still have the ability to control in here whether it tends toward light or tends toward dark, which is what I want out of this controller. So I'm going to call this contrast control, and you're going to see how this comes into play later. All right, next we're going to add a black and white layer, and this is basically just a switch. So if I want to, I can turn off all my color below the color tone effect or the radial effect that we're going to add. So these three constitute our base image. I'm going to put those in a folder and call this base image. Okay, so now for the radial halftone effect. The first thing I'm going to do is just create a new document. And this new document is going to be 1920 by 1920. And we're going to hit OK. And here we go. So this is what we're going to use to create our burst that we're then going to use to turn this into kind of a line cut illustration. So the first thing is I need a burst of equally distanced lines. So how do we create this? Well, first thing I need is a center guide. I'm going to show you how to create center guides using the guide layout. So I'm going to go to new guide layout, and if you open it, it'll probably look something like this. I'm going to go to the columns, set this to 2 and get rid of the gutter. I'm going to turn on rows, set that to 2, get rid of the gutter, make sure my margins is off, and then clear existing guides, and then I'm going to hit OK. That'll give me a perfect center guide, which I need for the next step. I'm going to go to my gradients here, make sure my gradient is on foreground to transparent, put it on this center gradient here, and then hit D to default my colors to black and white. All right, and then with black, I'm going to go from the center here, hold down Shift, and then go to this edge. And that's going to give me one nice black gradient from the center to white on the edge. I'm going to go to Edit, Define Pattern, and we're going to call this one line. And then I'm going to go down to here and add a pattern. Now, the beauty of having this as a pattern is I can scale it down. So if I went 50, it's going to give me 2. If I go down to 10, it's going to give me 10. And if I go down to 1, it's going to give me 100. Now, the problem with this is 100 is kind of where I want it to be. But if I want to go any smaller than this, I can't, because 1 is the smallest I can scale this. So if I wanted to double my lines again, I can't do 0.5. So to resolve that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to 10, hit OK, and then go to Edit, Define Pattern again, and we're going to call this base 10. Now if I double click here and select my base 10, you're going to see that I now at 10% have 100, and I can reduce this further to 5, 2, or what have you for smaller lines. But for this, I'm going to start with just 10, hit OK. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of gray to the top of this, and you're going to see why in a second, but this is going to muddle our middle. And with a linear gradient and with a 50% gray, I'm going to add just a little bit of gray along the top edge here, something like that. And then I'm going to select both of these and convert them to a smart object. And then with the smart object, I'm going to go to Distort Polar Coordinates. And there you can see we now have our line. And the reason I added that gray is without it, we get this weird kind of moire pattern in here. And that's not going to help us in our image. So I want to get rid of that. And we're doing that with our little gray gradient. All right, next, I want to convert this to a smart object one more time so that the polar coordinates is baked in. So I'm going to go convert to smart object, and we're going to call this halftone radial. All right, I'm going to pull that in here, and we're going to do a transform, just make that a lot bigger, and then put this on hard mix. There you can see we are getting that effect that we want. Now it's because it's at 100%, we're getting a very, very sharp threshold. I want to reduce the fill here to 90, just smooth some of those lines out. And if we want to smooth them out further, I'm going to show you a couple things we can do. So first, let's just make this a little bit bigger here. The first thing we can do is on our base image here, we can add a little bit of median. And what that's going to do if we zoom in is it's going to smooth out those lines. Now we don't want it too smooth, so probably something around 3 to 5 is going to do the trick. So let's hit OK. And then with our contrast controller here, we can adjust how much is white or how much is black. So that gives us some nice control there. Next thing I want to do is just add some color to this. And I'm going to do all my coloring on top of the halftone radial. So first things first is I'm going to add a gradient. And for this gradient, I want some color. So maybe let's go into our oranges. And I will select maybe this one here. I do want it to go to a slightly darker purple at the end. So probably go somewhere around here. And then I also want this to be slightly more orange. And then I want a starting color that's a little lighter. So something like this. I want to put this on radial. And then I want to put this on multiply. Now I want the radial to line up with the radial here. So I can double click on this, and before making any settings in here, if I click on the image itself, I can actually drag around where the center point of this radial is. So I want that right about there. And then I think I want to scale this up just a little bit to about there. Okay, next I'm going to add a grunge layer on top of this. So I'm going to go into my Nucly grunge pack. If you don't have it, I have included this grunge layer in the assets as well. Also, I've included a link in the description where you can get my full grunge pack. Okay, so we'll put that in here. For this, I'm going to use the difference blending mode and set the fill on this to 25. And that's going to add a little bit of grunge in my darks and a little bit of grunge in my lights. All right, next thing I want to do is just color my blacks a bit. So to do that, I'm going to add a curve layer on top of everything, go to my blues and just bring up the blue a bit, put a little bit of blue in there, and then maybe bring down the top, just compensate there, add a little more yellow to my highlights. I think that looks pretty nice. The one other thing I can do here is adjust my black and white. That would give me more color in here. Also, I can go in here and just either adjust the fill on this if I want to. If I want to get more lines, I can reduce the fill. That's going to reduce the contrast of my base image. Or if I want higher contrast, I can increase the fill on this. So a lot of control here, and you can kind of play with these almost as sliders. So you could adjust the fill here until you get the effect that you want. You can also double click in here and adjust how much of this, and you can see all that's happening underneath these layers which are creating our effect. All right, then finally I want to show you the power of having this as a smart object. So now I can double click in here and just go File, Place Embedded. I'm going to select this Raffaella file, just make that bigger and then close that. And voila, we have the same effect but with this image. And now using our various sliders, we can adjust this. So for this one, I would want to make this quite a bit darker here. Maybe something like that. I also might want to turn off my black and white. Let's go ahead and turn that off. It's giving us some cool color effects. And here we can also adjust that color if we'd like. So maybe I want for this one, I want to have something like that. I think that looks pretty cool. And for this, I also want to have a little eye highlight. And if I go anywhere below this stack of layers and just add a little bit of white with a soft brush, it's going to add it underneath the effects. So all those same effects will be applied to it. And just add a little highlight to the eye there, something like that. And I like that. Can also obviously use a different color gradient if we want. Maybe we want to try this one with something a little more like this. Any of these that we can try, you can see right away what that looks like. And if we want, we can also just turn this off entirely. See what that looks like with color. That actually looks pretty nice. All right, and then the last one I want to show you, we'll just double click on this, go File, Place Embedded again. I'm going to grab this last image. And for this one, let's say I wanted to have more or less lines. Because this is a smart object as well, we have control over that. I can double click on this, double click here, and then double click here and just change this. So if I wanted more lines, I could go to 5. Let's close both of these out, and you can see I now have much finer lines in this image. And again, I have full control here of what I want, light or dark. And for this image, I would definitely want to add some white highlights into the eyes again. Just do that by painting some white here. And there you have it. And again, you can adjust where the radial starts from. You can see you can get very cool looking effects with this, like for this image, maybe somewhere like that. And I can also adjust lightness and darkness. And for something like this, let's say I wanted to have these lines also appear in this white area here. What I can do is take my halftone radial, put it down here, and put it on multiply. Double click on it here, and then just take it under the blend if, take it out of all the dark areas so that it's just in these very white areas. Hold down Option, split this, and then just take down the fill until it's just a subtle effect there. So maybe something like this. And then I would take both of these, hold down Command so that I have both selected, link them. That way if I move one, it's going to move both. So there you have it. That's how you recreate the effect in Photoshop. And hopefully in the course of this, you've learned some tips, tricks, and techniques that you can use in your own images. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe to my channel, leave a like, leave a comment, share this video, do all that stuff that you do for the content creators you enjoy. And here's some other videos to check out. I will see you next time.